Yo, what's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to go over some of my favorite plays for the Sunday main slate on DraftKings, the Week 1 main slate. We have 12 games this Sunday. We're just going to cover DraftKings in this video. I will be making a separate video later today going over some of my favorite plays on Yahoo. So if you guys are playing on Yahoo for Sunday NFL, make sure you check that video out. I would really appreciate it. We're going to go through each position. I'll hit on like 4 or 5 guys that I really like. And something new I'm going to do this year is towards the end of the video, we'll look at an early lineup build. I'll build out an early lineup, just talk through each position, see if this is a position we maybe want to pay up at, if we want to spin down at, if there's any value. I'll be sure to touch on those value plays. Probably going to spend a couple minutes at each position, and like I said, we'll build out a lineup at the end of the video. Before we do get started, guys, I would appreciate it if you would drop a like on the video. And if you are new to the channel, with it being NFL season, we're probably going to get some new viewers to the channel. So thank you guys for checking out this video. Make sure you click that subscribe button down below. I'm going to be uploading a ton of NFL videos every week this year. I'm going to have videos for the showdown slates. If you are planning to play the showdown slate for Thursday Night Football, I do already have a video up on that slate. So if you want to check that out, I'll leave a link down in the description. You can check that video out after you watch this one. Would appreciate it as well. But let's start off at the top of the quarterback position. Patrick Mahomes is our most expensive option on this slate. He's $7,200 in a matchup against Jacksonville. This is definitely a spot where Mahomes is kind of like a tournament play only. He's just not an optimal cash spend-up option on this slate. Given the matchup against Jacksonville, I don't think you need to pay up at quarterback either on this slate because there are some really good values that we will touch on, like once you get 6K and below, once you get below Lamar Jackson, or you could even include Lamar Jackson in there. So Mahomes for me, unless I'm like stacking that KC Jacksonville game, which I think does have some appeal. Right now it does have one of the higher totals on the slate. I believe it's at 51.5. Yeah, it opened at 52.5. It's down to 51.5, but that's still the highest total on this 12-game main slate. So that game definitely has appeal for stacking. If you want to stack it, Mahomes is obviously in play, but as an optimal cash play, I don't think we need to pay up for him. One guy I do like if you're stacking a game is Jameis Winston. I really like this spot for Jameis Winston against the 49ers. I like this game a lot. Winston's someone that we'll talk about when we get over to Yahoo's video, or to the Yahoo video, because he's really cheap on Yahoo. But on DraftKings, where he's expensive, I still think he's worth the price tag. I expect Winston's going to have a good year. He's going to throw the ball a ton. He threw the ball a ton last year, 35, 45 times a game. Tampa Bay really doesn't have much of a running game. The offense is going to run through Winston. So I do like him as a spend-up option. I think I'd actually play him over Mahomes on Sunday, which might be a hot take, but I really like Winston here. I think he's going to have a great year for fantasy. He's definitely my favorite option between Winston, Newton, Mayfield, Wilson, Goff, all those 6K guys. Give me Jameis Winston here against the 49ers. I expect a big game from him, and on DraftKings I'm going to have plenty of exposure to him. He is one of my favorite spend-ups if I am going to spend up. But I do want to talk about some of these value plays we have. So there's a lot of options once you get below 6K. Just a couple that stand out. Dak Prescott against the Giants at 5,900 is in play for me as a cheap option. On the other side of that Tampa Bay game, I do like Jimmy Garoppolo a lot at 5,800. It's a great matchup for Garoppolo facing this Tampa Bay defense. Tampa Bay secondary is just not really good, one of the worst in the NFL. I think Garoppolo's in a very good spot, and he's only 5,800. He's very cheap. So he is someone you could also look at for a cheap option. Then a couple more guys, 2 more guys I really like. Well, 3, I guess you could say. Kyler Murray at home against the Lions. Kyler Murray just too cheap here for the upside that he gives you. It's first regular season game for Murray, so it's hard to predict how he's going to play. But just watching him in college, how much rushing upside he has, how well he can throw the ball, I do expect Murray to put up a pretty decent game for this $5,600 salary. So he's in play for me as a cheap option. Kirk Cousins as well against the Falcons I like a lot. This game definitely has appeal for stacking as well. More so on the Minnesota side. Guys like Cousins, Thielen, Diggs, Dalvin Cook I think are really good plays. Against that Minnesota defense, there's not a ton that I want to target. Like you could always play Julio Jones, but this is one of his tougher matchups. I think Devontae Freeman, now that Tevin Coleman is out of the situation, Devontae Freeman could be in play as a running back. Don't really want to go to Matt Ryan. But on the Vikings side, there are a lot of plays, and Cousins at 5,500 as a value option, he does stand out as one of the more underpriced values. Just given how good Cousins was last year, he was a guy that could give you pretty much 20 DraftKings points, felt like almost every slate. He did struggle a bit last year. He was pretty up and down, but I like this spot for Cousins. When he's in the right matchup, he can definitely produce, and I would say this is a pretty good matchup in a home game against the Falcons. So at 5,500, he's one guy I do like. And then lastly, Nick Foles against Kansas City. Another game that has some stack appeal. On the Jacksonville side, there's a couple guys I really like. I do like Foles as a value quarterback. I think Leonard Fournette, factoring in his DraftKings salary, is one of the top running back plays. I think D.D. Westbrook is a great value at receiver. Those are three guys I like a lot from the Jacksonville side. So if you're stacking this game, if you want to play like Foles, Westbrook, and Fournette, and then run it back with like Tyreek Hill or something, I could see doing that. I do like Foles as a value option. He'd probably be behind Cousins and behind Murray for me. But if you're getting a lot of exposure to that game, I would for sure have exposure to him. But there's really not much I like below Foles. I don't really want to play guys like Eli Manning or Ryan Fitzpatrick. They're kind of in tough matchups, and they're just not good quarterbacks to begin with. They are very cheap, so I guess I could see some appeal. Like Jacoby Brissett, now that Luck is retired, Brissett's only 4,400. In a matchup, though, on the road against the Chargers, it's hard to predict if he's going to really have a good game. So if you're paying down, I like those like mid 5K guys. Don't think I'm going to be going below 5K. Just don't think you need to, given the fact that it's week one. There's a lot of soft pricing around the industry. You don't really need to go that cheap at quarterback and take that big of a risk. So I think we covered the quarterback position. I think pretty much talked about the guys I'm going to be going to. Let's go ahead and move on to running back. So at running back, if I'm paying up, there's two guys I want. It's Saquon Barkley and it's Christian McCaffrey. We did get the news earlier today that Ezekiel Elliott is going to play in week one. He did get his contract signed, but it looks like he's only going to play about 20-25 snaps, which is just not enough of a workload to pay $9,200 for him. Now, if that news changes as we get closer to Sunday, if we get the news that Zeke's going to play his full workload, he's going to play like 90-80% of the snaps, which is what he normally plays, then Zeke could be an option in $9,200, but I just don't think you need to take the risk on this slate. I think you just play Barkley for $200 less, who we know is going to have a full workload. Christian McCaffrey for $400 less, who we also know is going to have a full workload. Between Barkley and McCaffrey, I think I'd slightly lean with Barkley, but I honestly feel like there's going to be enough value on this week one slate to where we can probably play both of them together. If I'm going to spend up at any position, it's definitely going to be running back, and those are the two guys I'm going to look to. Do like them quite a bit. They are my favorite spend-up options. There are some good mid-tier plays, though. David Johnson, I do like a lot at $7,700 in this game, but that price tag is pretty expensive. We'll talk about him on Yahoo when we make that video. He's very cheap over there. That's where I really like him. At $7,700, I could see going to David Johnson, but you can get like Le'Veon Bell for cheaper. Le'Veon Bell is just someone that I think is underpriced for his talent level. Obviously, we don't know what to expect now that he's on a new team with the Jets. It's a matchup against the Bills that I'm not really a fan of. I'm not a fan of this game either. This game isn't very appealing for offense. Like, it does have one of the lower totals on the slate at 41. But we know how good Le'Veon Bell is. It's already said, Bell said, don't hold back when discuss his week one role. He's going to be full go. He's going to get the touches, it seems like. And at 7,100, I'm definitely going to be overweight on him. I expect he'll be somewhat low owned just because we have so many good options at the top. And if you go like $1,000 cheaper, you have a lot of good options in Fournette, Dalvin Cook, even Nick Chubb. I don't think Le'Veon Bell is going to be that popular. So in tournament lineups, if he's going to be 10% owned, I'll definitely play him in 20-25% of my lineups and be overweight. Because I think Bell just does give you so much upside at his price tag. But once we get to the 6K range, there are two guys that really stand out to me here. Leonard Fournette at home against Kansas City for $6,100 and Dalvin Cook for $6K against the Falcons. So Dalvin Cook's a guy I want to hit on first. He's one of my favorite plays on DraftKings at the running back position. He's just way too cheap for this matchup with the Falcons. The Falcons were a team last year that gave up a ton of pass opportunities to running backs. I believe they led the league last year in receptions allowed to running backs. So we should be seeing a lot of targets for Dalvin Cook in this game. He's going to get the carries as well. He ended the year on a really good note. I expect he keeps that going here in week one against the Falcons. Should probably get about 15, 17, anywhere in that range in terms of carries. And then you'll probably get about 5 or 6 targets for him as well. He's a very good running back when he's healthy. I'm a Florida State fan, so I know how good this guy was when he was with Florida State. I expect he's going to have a great year if he can stay healthy. He's a really good running back, very talented. I do like Dalvin Cook at 6K. I feel like now that some of the running back value we had is gone with Tony Pollard no longer available, now that Zeke's going to play, I think a lot of my builds, I'm going to be paying up for 2 running backs, mostly Barkley and McCaffrey, and then probably playing a guy like Dalvin Cook in my flex spot, and then really spending down a receiver because there are a couple good receiver value plays that I like that we'll touch on. So Dalvin Cook at 6K, I like a ton here against the Falcons. I do like Leonard Fournette as well. I think Fournette's just underpriced for the upside that he gives you in this matchup against Kansas City. This is a game, like I said, that's one of the more appealing games in terms of total, in terms of stackability, 51.5 total. I do expect Jacksonville's going to be able to put up some points here, and Fournette just feels too cheap for the workload he's going to get. Should get close to 20 carries, probably going to see some targets as well. Him and Dalvin Cook are 2 of the better mid-range running back options in my opinion. 61 and 6K, both guys really stand out to me. But then once you get below 6K, I do have some appeal. Or I think guys like Kerryon Johnson, Chris Carson do have some appeal. They're definitely going to be behind Fournette and behind Cook for me. But I do play multiple lineups for NFL, so I'll probably have some exposure to Kerryon Johnson and to Chris Carson as cheaper options. Devontae Freeman, don't want to overlook him. Now that Tevin Coleman's on the 49ers, I think Freeman's going to see more of a heavier workload. It is a tough matchup against the Vikings on the road, but this game will be played indoors. Freeman was much better indoors. He's always been better at home in Atlanta where it's indoors, but even on the road in dome games, he's always been pretty good. So at 5,300, Devontae Freeman could definitely be in play as a cheaper option, more so for tournaments. Probably wouldn't go there in cash games. But now for value, there's not much value now that Tony Pollard's off the table. He was going to be a guy we looked to a lot with Ezekiel Elliott potentially missing. Now that Zeke's going to play, we can't go to Pollard. It looks like Kenyon Drake's going to play as well, so there's probably going to be a timeshare between him and Keelan Ballage, which kind of takes them off the board for me. Don't really want to go to them. LaShawn McCoy with his new team could be interesting, but it doesn't seem like he's going to get too heavy of a workload in Kansas City. We might see his workload increase as the season goes on, so I don't really want to go to him. There are 2 guys, though, that I will mention. You have Darius Guice for 4,400. Looks like he's going to be the number 1 running back for the Redskins, and this is not the best spot. Anytime you can get a number 1 RB that's going to get probably 15 touches, I would imagine. I don't think he's going to get like a crazy amount of workload, but if you just read right here in the blurb, we feel like Guice can be a first, second down, even third down back if needed. They're going to give him the ball, it seems like. He's only 4,400, so he's definitely in play as a guy you could go to. Now that Pollard's off the table, I think you can go to Guice at 4,400, but he doesn't feel like as good of a play as Pollard was going to feel like at 4,500. Then one more guy we'll talk about is Singletary, Devin Singletary. He's very cheap at 3,600. So it looks like he is also going to be a guy that gets plenty of touches for his price tag. Right now, the Bills posted running back depth chart. Singletary is behind Frank Gore, so Frank Gore is going to be the number 1 back, but we obviously know that Frank Gore might not play a ton. He might not get a ton of touches, and then he's going to be ahead of TJ Yeldon. He's one of their younger running backs. They do have a lot of faith in this guy. It looks like he is going to be a big part of the rushing attack, so at 3,600 as a value running back against the Jets, he could definitely be in play. It is risky because he's going to be sharing some time with Frank Gore, and TJ Yeldon might get a little bit of work as well. But he's very cheap, so the workload kind of factors into the price tag. Even if he gets like 10, 15 touches, that could be good enough at 3,600. So Singletary as a value running back's in play, but don't feel like this is a position we're going to have to go cheap because we'll talk about some of the receiver values I like. Let's go ahead and move on to receiver now. I do like a lot of the expensive running backs, so I think paying up for receiver is probably going to be something I do as more of a contrarian thing. Like in cash games, I think you probably want to pay up at running back for either one of the Barkley or McCaffrey. I think you want to get at least one of those 2 guys in your lineup, if not both. I do like Odell Beckham, though, a lot in tournaments. This is just such a good matchup for him against the Titans. This Titans secondary is just not good. Beckham should be able to just run free on this Titans secondary. Nobody's going to be able to slow him down, going to be able to stop him. He is the most expensive receiver on DraftKings, but I think he's worth the price tag here at 8,100. A guy like Julio Jones, this feels like a spot where Julio Jones could still put up numbers, but against this Vikings defense with Xavier Rhodes, one of the better corners in the league, It's just a really tough spot for Julio Jones. Only way I would play him was if I was game stacking that game. If I was playing like 2 or 3 Minnesota guys and I wanted to play someone else on the Atlanta side, you could obviously look to Julio Jones, but he's going to be someone that's really low owned, not going to be looked at a lot, but for good reason. It's a really tough matchup. You have Beckham for just 100 more in a good matchup. You have Mike Evans for 100 less in a great matchup. So it doesn't really feel like a week where I'm going to be going to Julio Jones. Might play him in like 1 of 10 lineups or something, but that's probably it. Nothing more than 10%. Doesn't feel like a week where I need to go crazy on Julio. I like Mike Evans for cheaper. That's kind of why I'm not going to be going to Julio. It's a great matchup for Mike Evans. It's a great game to target for points, projected points scored. Like I said, I like players on both sides of this game. Mike Evans should be able to dominate in terms of targets. Him and Chris Godwin should see probably close to 10 targets apiece. Both of those guys are going to be great receiver options, I think, all season. And it's a great matchup against the 49ers. So if I'm paying up a receiver, I'm going to Mike Evans, I'm going to Odell Beckham. But it doesn't feel like a position where paying up is going to be something I try and do, because I just think there are better options at running back to pay up for. They probably just give you a little bit of a higher floor and a higher ceiling. So now let's talk about some of these mid-tier guys that we could potentially go to. A couple of guys that stand out here: Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, both from the Vikings. I do like here, especially if you're playing Kirk Cousins and you want to pair him with one of these guys. Thielen feels a little bit too cheap for just how good of a receiver he is. This was one of the best receivers in the league last year, and he's not really priced like it. He should be up there with Beckham and Julio and Mike Evans in price. The fact that he's 6,800 just really baffles me, so I do like Adam Thielen quite a bit. Stephon Diggs as well gives you some upside. I think I would prefer Thielen if I was just playing one of the two, but feels like a game where you could probably play both guys and they could still put up pretty good scores, because I think Minnesota does have a relatively high projected total. I'll look at it real quickly if I can find Minnesota. They've got right now the game has a 48 implied total, and Minnesota's total is at 26, so definitely a team that's projected to put up some points. But now in this mid-range, some other guys that stand out. Like I said, I really like that Tampa Bay game, so Chris Godwin I like quite a bit if you want to pair him with Jameis Winston. If you don't want to pay all the way up for Mike Evans, you could definitely go to Godwin at 6,200. Tyler Boyd's someone that could see some targets with A.J. Green out, but against Seattle, I don't feel like I want to go too heavy on Cincinnati this week. Don't feel like I need to play too many Bengals players. They're just not going to be an offense that projects to put up points, especially without A.J. Green. It's going to be a tough spot for the Bengals. I honestly think the Seahawks defense is probably one of the better defense plays on the week, just given the matchup at home against a really bad offense. But Tyler Boyd should at least see enough targets to where he's viable at 5,800. But now talking about like 5K and below, let's hit on some of the value plays I want to talk about. So I would say one of my favorite values at receiver is D.D. Westbrook. He's only 4,800. He's very, very cheap. He showed a lot of chemistry with Nick Foles in the preseason. I expect Westbrook's going to get probably close to 7, 8 targets, if not more than that. It's a great matchup against Kansas City. It's a great game to target for implied total for projected points. Westbrook is a really talented receiver. Does give you a lot of upside. We kind of saw it towards the end of last year. He did have some pretty big games against Tennessee, against Miami. He had a pretty good game. Had a decent game against Buffalo. 25 DraftKings points earlier in the year against the Jets. Westbrook's only 4,800, which does feel too cheap, especially now that he's shown chemistry with Nick Foles, and looks like Nick Foles wants to get him the ball. So I like Westbrook quite a bit as a value. He's definitely one of my favorite spin-down options at 4,800. But if you're like playing a guy like Kyler Murray, I think pairing him with Christian Kirk makes a ton of sense at 4,700 if you need a value play. Deshaun Jackson seems to always crush in revenge games. This is a revenge game for him. Facing the Redskins at 4,500, he could be playable if you want to go to him as a value receiver. A couple more guys I want to touch on. So I do like Marquise Goodwin as a value at only 4K. That San Francisco game is just a game I want to target. I want to get both sides. I want to get exposure to both sides. It looks like Goodwin is going to be the number 2 receiver behind Dante Pettis. So at 4K as a value, definitely could be in play. Deebo Samuel as well. I expect Samuel's probably going to be the number 3 receiver though. So Goodwin will probably see more targets than Samuel. So at 4K, Goodwin's a guy that gives you a lot of upside for that really cheap price tag. And then lastly, with Kenny Stills traded, I expect that's going to open up some receiver targets for Albert Wilson and for Devontae Parker. It is a terrible matchup for both guys having to face the Ravens, but Fitzpatrick's going to have to throw the ball to somebody. Wilson should see probably 6, 7, 8 targets, and he's only 3,900. Definitely in play as a cheap option. Does give you a little bit of upside at that price tag. It's a terrible matchup. I definitely don't want to be going too heavy on Dolphins players, but if I need a cheap receiver, he's for sure in play at only 3,900, especially now that the number one receiver, Kenny Stills, is no longer on the team. And then I guess one more, John Ross, assuming he should see a few more targets with A.J. Green out, 3,900. I think I'd rather play Albert Wilson at the same price tag, but John Ross, big play ability, does have like deep threat potential, could be in play now that A.J. Green is out and should see a few more targets. Him and Tyler Boyd should both see a couple more targets. But let's go ahead and move on to tight end. Tight end probably a position this week where I feel like I'm going to have to pay down because now that we don't have as much value as we had early on in the season, or early on in the week, I should say, that's going to take guys like Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Zach Ertz kind of off the board. If you are going to pay up, though, I think George Kittle is one of the best tight end plays on the week here. Just such a good matchup for him against this Tampa Bay secondary. He's 6,600, which honestly feels a bit underpriced. I was surprised that Kelce was more expensive than him, just given the fact that Kelce's facing the Jaguars. Really good defense. Kittle's facing the Bucs, one of the worst defenses in the league. If I'm paying up at tight end, Kittle's the guy that I want. But let's just talk about some of these values, 4K and below. There's a couple guys that I really like. Hunter Henry against the Colts, I think, is a great value at 3,900. I think David Njoku against the Titans is a great value at 3,700. I think Delaney Walker is probably the best value overall for 3,500 against the Browns. All those tight ends are going to be cheap tight ends that I go to, 4K and below. Walker will probably be my most exposed tight end, but I'll definitely have some exposure to Njoku. I'll have some exposure to Henry. Even a guy like Greg Olsen feels underpriced for just how good of a tight end he is at only 3,200. Another guy you could potentially look to for value. So I'm definitely probably going to be paying down at tight end for these cheap options because I want to get at least one of those two expensive running backs in. Now moving on to defense. Quickly going over defense, I think my favorite play here is probably the Seahawks at home against the Bengals. I usually always try to pay down for defense, and the Seahawks are a team that does stand out. Just facing a really bad offense, plus they're playing at home as well. But if you really want to go cheap, I usually always try to target cheap defenses when they're at home. Maybe like a Dolphins for only 2,100 at home against the Ravens could be playable, but when you're facing a quarterback like Lamar Jackson who's going to scramble a lot, it's going to be hard for him to get sacked. It's going to be hard for him to fumble, to get turnovers, which is obviously what you're searching for. You want a quarterback that's going to get sacked, that's going to throw the ball a lot, that maybe could throw a potential interception, a pick six or something. And Jackson doesn't throw the ball a ton, so maybe that's not the best play, but they're very cheap at 2,100. You have the Cardinals facing the Lions, could potentially be a cheap defense. I think now that the Chargers are going to be able to face Jacoby Brissett instead of Andrew Luck, the Chargers are probably one of the better defenses at home against the Colts. So at 3K, them and the Seahawks and the Chargers probably stand out to me as two of the better defense plays on the slate. But I think we pretty much covered each position, talked about where I'm going to be going. So let's look at a lineup build now. I think we'll start off at quarterback. I think we want to start off with paying down here for one of these cheap options. I know I'm going to include Dalvin Cook in my running back spot, so I don't know if I want to go to Kirk Cousins at quarterback. So let's just go to either Kyler Murray or Nick Foles. I know I'm going to be probably putting Westbrook in the lineup, so let's just put Nick Foles in there. Let's go to Westbrook because I do like Westbrook a lot as a value, one of my favorite values. We'll pair him with Foles, have that quarterback-receiver combo. And then, like I said, I do really like Dalvin Cook at running back. He is one of my favorite running back plays at 6K. So we'll just start off there. Definitely want to try and pay up for one of these expensive running backs, whether it's Barkley or McCaffrey. I do prefer Barkley, so let's plug Barkley in there and then see what we can work with. That leaves us about 5K remaining per player. We could definitely make this work. Let's see if we could probably get McCaffrey in there as well. We're going to have to go cheap at tight end and defense, which I know is something we'll want to do. So for defense, I mentioned the Seahawks and the Chargers are probably two of my favorite defense plays. We'll just plug the Chargers in there for now since they're a little bit cheaper. And at tight end, I did talk about Delaney Walker as being one of my favorite cheap options here. And if we want to get McCaffrey in there, we're going to need to go cheap at tight end. So let's just plug Walker in there at 3,500. Now that leaves us 4,800 remaining per player for two wide receiver spots, which I think we can easily work with. If we want to go really cheap, there's a couple viable options down here. I think you have Marquise Goodwin at 4K, who's playable. Albert Wilson at 3,900, who I think is playable. John Ross at 3,900 as well, I think is playable. I feel probably better going to Goodwin because I just really like that game in general. So if we were to plug Goodwin in there at 4K, that'd get us up to 5,600. So then we could go to potentially someone like Jarvis Landry, maybe DJ Moore, maybe Dante Pettis, which I don't mind if you want to go to Landry. He's not my favorite play on the slate, but if you want to play him at 5,600, I could see doing that. But let's see if we can change up these a little bit. Maybe not pay up for Barkley, or maybe not pay up for McCaffrey and get a different running back in there. Or maybe we'll play a receiver at our flex, but I usually always try and get 3 running backs in there if possible. Let's go down from McCaffrey a little bit, get in my boy Le'Veon Bell, who I really like this week at 7,100. That's definitely going to free us up some salary at receiver. If we still want to go cheap with Marquise Goodwin at only 4K, we could plug him in there, and that would leave us probably enough for an expensive receiver we could potentially look to. So let's plug Goodwin in there if I can find him. 4K, that leaves us 7,300 remaining per player. That'd leave you enough for Keenan Allen, who I do like quite a bit. I don't mind playing at all. Leave you enough for Adam Thielen, who you could also go to. If you took Thielen, then you could probably take Nick Foles out there and then put Kirk Cousins in, sort of have like the Vikings onslaught. But that's a build I like a lot right there. I think that's a build that gives you a ton of upside. You have guys at every position that should see at least probably 5, 6, 7 targets, maybe more. You got 3 running backs that should get a pretty heavy workload, all 3 of them. You got a quarterback that projects really well for a game that projects really well. So this is a build that I like quite a bit as well. Those are just a couple builds that stand out. Paying up a receiver is not something I'm going to try and do much, but if you want to, my favorite play here is probably a guy like either Mike Evans or Odell. So let's build out a lineup real quick where we pay up for receiver and then we'll end the video. So I usually like to pair my quarterback with my receiver, especially in tournaments. So if we want to pay up for Odell, we can go to Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, I believe, is really cheap, or he's 6,400, which isn't as cheap as I thought he was, but let's just plug them two together. That's definitely going to thin us out at running back. We're probably not going to be able to pay up for either Barkley or McCaffrey, so let's get a couple of these mid-tier guys in. I mentioned I really like Fournette and Cook in the mid-range. Let's plug both of them in there. We go to a cheap tight end. If we play Delaney Walker, that would give us some exposure to the other side of this game. We got 2 Cleveland guys, run it back with someone on the Tennessee side. So we can plug Walker in there at 3,500. Defense, we know we're going to want a cheap defense, probably either the Chargers or the Seahawks. Let's just go with the Seahawks in this one since we went to the Chargers in the last lineup. So we got 5,600 remaining per player for 2 receiver spots and for a flex spot. So we could either pay down at receiver for one of those value guys I hit on. We could go to maybe another mid-tier running back, maybe a guy like Le'Veon Bell or someone like Kerryon Johnson, Chris Carson, Devontae Freeman. If we wanted, we could go to one of these cheap running backs that potentially are playable, like Darius Guice, Devin Singletary's very cheap, who I liked. For now, let's put a guy like Le'Veon Bell in there, since I do like Bell a lot this week. We plug him in there at 7,100. That leaves us 4,850 remaining per player. We won't go to Goodwin since we've already put him in one of the lineups, but we know we're going to need a cheap receiver. So looking for one of these cheap receivers, I did mention Albert Wilson. I think he's playable at 3,900. We plug him in there. That leaves us 5,800 remaining per player. That leaves us enough to get to Tyler Boyd, who I think is a good option with A.J. Green out. Cooper Kupp against the Panthers could definitely be playable at 5,700. For now, let's just plug Boyd in there at 5,800. If you wanted to, you could take out the Seahawks defense, put in the Chargers defense, and that'd give you enough to get up to Alshon Jeffrey, which you could do. But this is another build I like quite a bit. This is more of a tournament build. Since you're paying up at receiver, you're paying up at quarterback, which I don't think is going to be the optimal way to go. But that's still another lineup build that gives you a ton of upside and is a build you could look at. But I think that's it for this video, guys. We built out about 3 lineups, went through each position, talked about all the guys I liked at each position, the guys that really stood out to me. This video is pretty long. I'm sorry for that, but I wanted to give you guys as much information as possible in this video. Later today, I'll be making pretty much the same video. I'll be going over Yahoo pricing, go through each position, talk about some of my favorite Yahoo plays. We'll build out a couple Yahoo lineups as well. Make sure you check that video out. It will be up later today on my channel. I would really appreciate it. Make sure you check out the Showdown video for Thursday Night Football. That video will be down in the description box. I will leave a link down below. If you are planning to play the Showdown slate, you definitely give that video a like. I would really appreciate it. But I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you enjoyed, like I said, drop a like. Make sure you subscribe if you have not already. If you do have any questions, you can leave any questions, any comments down below in the comment section, or feel free to message me on Twitter at the DFS_GOAT. Pretty active on Twitter, always replying to your tweets, always replying to your DMs. So if you need to contact me on Twitter, feel free to do so. But I think that's it, guys. Good luck tonight, or good luck on Sunday. Appreciate you watching the video. We will see you in the next one.